This is massive. Loot boxes are gambling.
Today we have one of the most important anti-loot box updates pretty much yet. What has happened? Well, the UK government has been asked to classify loot boxes as gambling by the parliamentary committee that we've been following over the last few months.
Wow.
What they recommend is major in its implications,
wow.
And today we're going to break it all down.
It's about goddamn motherfucking time, isn't it? Like, we've been waiting on this for a while.
Welcome back to another Industry Report, the series where we take a closer look at the biggest stories in gaming. Now, instead of the usual sub thing, I'm instead going to pimp out our Discord today. We launched it last week over on our other channel, and yeah, if you'd like to talk about this story in more depth, that's actually pretty much the perfect place to do it. So, Discord's down below. With that said, let's dive in. The recent UK scrutiny appears to have culminated with a new report presented to the UK Parliament following months of intensive parliamentary hearings with technology and gaming companies. The report compiled by the DCMS was published this week, and it comprises a whopping 81 pages of findings, concerns, and recommendations for further action on everything ranging from loot boxes to skin betting and shining.
I want to ask you guys a question. Like, how many of those pages do you think that most of the people that voted on this read? How many of those pages do you guys think they read? I think they read one page. The cover, they're like, really? It's addictive? Shit, okay, wow. Put that down. Tell me no more. And that's it. The front page, yeah, the cover.
RuneScape while it's at it. The stated goal of the Immersive and Addictive Technologies report is to, quote, build on the newly established principle of online harms by considering potential psychosocial and financial harms associated with the use of immersive technologies. It goes on to confirm that the undertaking of the report was motivated by the World Health Organization's formal designation of gaming disorder, as well as, quote, calls from gamers, academics, and clinicians for urgent action to better understand and address the condition. Yes, it seemingly isn't even a case where it's, you know, government types who have wanted this. They are actually citing annoyed consumers as to why they're doing this report. So
that's fucking perfect, man. And I think the best part about it is, like, you know, like, people are so mad about them classifying the gaming addiction disorder, and now it ended up helping them get rid of loot boxes, at least over in the UK, maybe.
You could be forgiven for maybe rolling your eyes during that last statement, but the very existence of this report is significant for a number of reasons. First of all, it's worth noting that this does not appear to be a malicious action undertaken by the government to interfere with gaming and to tell people where to spend their money. At least that's my read on it once actually going through it.
Doesn't seem that way.
On the contrary, the Immersive and Addictive Technologies report seemingly is a realization on the part of the House of Commons committee that something is deeply wrong here and that they think they need to do something to fix it. The UK government would be perfectly happy for the gaming industry to be self-regulating, not causing much of a fuss, but well, they've been self-regulating right now to the extent where they're basically running bizarre casinos aimed at children, so that obviously has not worked out, and it's very sad that it's really got this far. So the DMCS committee recommended that Parliament legislate to formally classify loot boxes as a means of gambling, thus bringing them under the legislative umbrella of the 2005 Gambling Act and the various protective and regulatory devices present within it. It also wants to convince Peggy to take gambling systems such as loot boxes into account when it comes to classifying games and to raise the recommended age rating of some games as a result, as well as introducing a new...
Did my tweet cause Parliament to do this? I mean, that's the question of the day. The way that I look at it, right, is that it got over 10,000 likes. We're basically making the laws over in the UK now. Okay, guys, we did this. We did this together.
New games industry tax as a means for paying for all of that. Now, the latter part of that to me is quite worrying. I mean, would my company, who is making a premium narrative adventure game, have to pay a special tax because of the scummy actions of the likes of EA? If so, it could have a serious negative impact on companies who are making good games and are just not responsible for this problem arising. On this, I'm as equally dissatisfied with the likes of EA, though, who in many ways have forced the government's hand by refusing to take responsibility. But still, this new levy, if it was to actually be a thing, that could reduce the UK's competitiveness. After all, Southern Ireland is just a few miles down the road, and it only has a 12.5 corporation tax rate. Anyway, the Immersive and Addictive Technologies report certainly voices a lot of grievances, but for the purposes of our video today, we're going to hone in on two of them. Of course, loot boxes and random rewards / RNG. Loot boxes and microtransactions are really in the firing line for the duration of this report, which relies on a 2018 report from the Gambling Commission, which found that 31% of 11 to 16-year-olds have paid for loot boxes with real money.
31%? 31 motherfucking percent. That's like every 1 in 3 kids is getting their fucking parents' credit card. Ma. Need my loot box. Come on, come on, come on. You know, and like imagine dad who comes home, you know, from working in the fucking coal mine or the oil field all day. You know, he's dirty, he's got fucking calluses on his hands. He's got fucking, you know, like tar on his face. He comes home. He's like, son, what'd you do all day? He's like, Dad, I spent $200, dude. Look at this skin. Look at this skin on my gun. Oh my God, Dad, aren't you happy for me? Think about that dad, man. He'd be fucking pissed. Like, look at my Fortnite skins, Dad.
As well as some testimonies from the public on their experiences with monetization in gaming. One member of public contacted the committee claiming that her adult son had ran up debts amounting to some £50,000 through purchasing microtransactions in RuneScape. His bank statements reveal that he spent £250 across 5 separate payments to Jagex, the company behind the successful online RPG, in one day, which is quite wild. The element of randomness inherent in loot boxes was also a serious cause for concern for the committee, as well as the discussion surrounding
$50,000.
The need for cooperation between the games industry and the relevant regulatory bodies is a clear theme running throughout this report. It states that it's critical that games companies behave in a responsible and transparent manner and are discouraged from exploiting information asymmetry. The committee states that the evidence shown to them confirms that RNG is a psychologically powerful design principle and that it mimics those techniques used by the wider gambling industry to attract and retain customers. The report lies in the work of B.F. Skinner, a 20th century American psychologist who claimed that people are neurologically hardwired to pull that metaphorical lever when there's only a chance of a reward rather than a guarantee of a reward.
That's variable reinforcement schedule. It's 70,000. Like, no, it's $70,000. If that's because it was pounds, right? Holy fuck, man. That's actually that is. How do you spend that much money on RuneScape, man? At least spend it on WoW or something like that. Why do you spend it on RuneScape, dude? Like, literally, like, you can literally create... Like, RuneScape is such a rudimentary game. You could create a dollar value. Each pixel he received in the game, you could probably equate that to a dollar value for this guy. That's how bad the graphics are in that game. And, like, you could literally narrow it down to the pixels that he has bought.
This report emphasizes that while some games reveal the content of a loot box to the player before they decide whether or not to purchase it, that the contents of loot boxes are typically unknown at the point of purchase. Now, of course, Rocket League is one such game that has moved away from randomized rewards inside its loot crates. Since developer Psyonix was acquired by Epic Games, the decision was made to tell the player what would be in each loot box, whereas previously everything was randomized. Now, this decision reflects an earlier move made by Epic in Fortnite Save the World mode, where the daily loot box was updated to reveal its exact contents, and they also had a number of measures to prevent basically binge purchases of like 40 at once. Players could see what was in a box and buy it if they were happy enough, or they could just wait until the shop reset and a new box was added. Now, this removes the apparently dangerous elements of pre-purchase randomization that the DCMS report claims is so beneficial. It's worth remembering, though, that Fortnite's Battle Royale mode has a storefront that offers items only for direct purchase with no random loot boxes, and that still earned Epic pretty much all the money in the world. It's also, of course, got a battle pass progressions.
It's actually a really good point, because people think that you need to have these fucking loot boxes, and if you don't have the loot boxes, you're not going to be able to make any fucking money. But the truth is that you are. I mean, like, Epic Games, if they're not selling random loot boxes, and like, how much money is Fortnite making? A lot. So, I mean, like, if they can do it, anybody can fucking do it. Okay, it's still randomized and overpriced. I don't know. I don't play Fortnite enough, but that's just what he's saying, right? And if they don't have random rewards, I don't see why anybody else needs to have them, right? Fortnite is very clear proof that you don't need to do this. Blizzard with in-game items. Well, Blizzard, Blizzard, you buy the in-game items, you know what they're going to be. So there's nothing to really to worry about. You know what they're going to fucking be.
system, and that definitely shows that, yeah, transparent and direct forms of monetization can actually work. Anyway, the desire for transparency is a very important theme throughout this report, and one of the reasons why the committee was so keen to communicate and cooperate with representatives from the wider games and tech industries. So they wanted that transparency, but that did not go as far as they expected.
No.
And who else but our old friends at EA Games would be really just the main example here of failing in that transparency. EA's representative at the committee discussions was Kerry Hopkins, the VP of Legal, whose responses were just awkward, bumbling, and more to the point, generally untrue. So get this, one of the main goals.
Wait, what'd she say? Let me go back.
So get this, untrue.
Somebody's going to Kerry Hopkins, who responded in a way that have implemented this mechanic in FIFA, is quite ethical and quite fun. Quite ethical and quite fun. Surprise mechanics. Okay.
So get this,
Sure.
one of the main goals for the DCMS committee during their discussions with the wider industry was to get a working and informed idea of what constitutes a healthy amount of gaming from the average person. So they reached out to various companies in order to be enlightened, to get information in an honest enough manner. Now this move showed that the committee, at least to some extent, recognized their lack of experience in gaming and wanted to learn. After all, they could hardly be making recommendations against excessively long gaming sessions if they didn't really know what would be considered excessive. In their words, they wanted to establish average levels of engagement. EA were not playing ball with them, though, when it came to releasing player data for FIFA. Despite claiming earlier on in discussions that EA track player data as a means of improving live service games, Hopkins pulled a 180 and stated that EA don't track anything and they just couldn't provide any info to the committee. Which is not true. The committee bit back in this, stating, as the company EA has told us, it does record how long a player is connected to the game, and telemetry from in-game behavior over that period could give an indication of play. We reject...
One sec, guys. We're back. We're good.
The assertion that the company does not know how long its users play for.
Yeah, how are you...
Clearly, the only thing that was transparent about EA was their lies. This lack of cooperation also serves to add an extra dimension of justification.
Who the fuck would believe that?
Just for the existence of this report in the first place. As already stated, the UK government seemingly does not want to have to wade into this and start bothering with legislating in this sort of arena. And they seemingly would be perfectly happy to just leave the industry to be very profitable, generate a lot of tax revenue, and just present them with no problems. But seemingly this just lack of good behavior from the games industry, well, it seemingly has just forced the committee's hand and made a lot of this happen, or at least accelerate it. If the committee thought that there were business practices across the games industry that were shady enough for them to have to get involved, even in a conciliatory capacity, then a lack of cooperation from the biggest players at the table, that will have done nothing to allay their fears. Indeed, the report states, in evidence to the committee, representatives from the games industry were willfully obtuse in answering the committee's questions on patterns of play. In other words, EA...
What do you mean? What do you mean gambling? What do you mean? No, we don't gamble. Well, what is FIFA anyway? I don't know. What is FIFA? Like, no, it's not a loot box. It's a loot crate. It's different. I mean, come on, man. Like, it's like, imagine... I wish I could fucking be there to see what their answers would be. That'd be so fucking funny.
Did themselves and the industry in general no favors by shutting their mouths, by basically lying and misdirecting. They have done so much damage to gaming broadly because they just will not take responsibility for what they're doing, and they will not work in a reasonable fashion with this body. Finally, this leads us into the topic of regulation. The DCMS report confesses this, quote, "It is of serious concern that there simply is no effective system in place to keep children off age-restricted platforms and games. The reactive way in which platforms are dealing with this problem further highlights the problems of online industries rolling out products without considering or mitigating against their potential adverse effects on users."
That's exactly the way it is with porn, right? I mean, like, anybody, it's like, oh, are you 18? Yeah, I'm 18. Okay, here's a titty. You know, and like, that's literally it, you know, and there's nothing you're going to do about that or anything like that. It's just like never going to go away. I get that, like, obviously some people, you know, they're like, oh, yeah, whatever. Obviously this is what it's going to be. I don't think they're ever going to get rid of it. The only way they can get rid of it is if they make it where you can't buy them. That's the only way they're ever going to make it not happen.
That's a pretty serious thing for them to say. So the question is here, what can be done? Well, the final recommendation of the committee's report is that the government implement measures which would see loot boxes be regulated under the 2005 Gambling Act. On the topic of exposing children to loot boxes, the report states, we recommend that loot boxes that contain the element of chance should not be sold to children playing games, and instead in-game credits should be earned through rewards through playing the game.
They shouldn't be sold at all. Wait a minute, they shouldn't be sold at all. Like, what do you mean they shouldn't be sold as credits? They shouldn't exist in any capacity at all, period. That's it, you just get rid of them. You can't get a credit card unless you're of age, so that's not their fault. Well, it's like, but there's plenty of people, like, there's literally no reason that they need to make loot boxes with unknown contents inside of them. There is literally no reason that that has to exist.
So, fairly reasonable in what they would want, and reasonable that children are not exposed to loot boxes. Then the report does also recognize that loot boxes and microtransactions can be integral parts of a game's revenue stream, so they recommend that PEGI incorporate gambling into its classification system and adjust their age ratings accordingly. So to wrap this up, even though the Immersive and Addictive Technologies report is essentially just a series of recommendations based on relatively informal discussions with select representatives of the games industry, it does just show how much difficulty the government would have in legislating here. Two of the final sweeping recommendations of the report essentially amount to handing responsibility for regulating video games over to the Gambling Commission and to PEGI. This is not really regulating effectively, though. It seems to be symbolic of a pervasive problem that many democracies have, wherein the government finds it overwhelmingly difficult to effectively legislate on modern problems, which often leads to, well, increases in expense and complexity that don't really produce their desired results. So, yes, even if the Gambling Commission, does find this stuff falling under their remit, I'm highly suspicious that they'll actually be able to do a good job. Absolutely, though, accountability is important for the games industry, and there are dodgy business practices going on. But that said, an influx of external interference from something like the UK government, that may not help matters. Instead, the onus in an ideal world should be on the companies to self-regulate and to be reasonable and to endeavor to, stop any horribly exploitative strategies from happening. But that obviously is not working right now, and that's the really sad bit. Consumer backlash will do a lot to dissuade bad behavior too, and it does appear that people are more willing to be outspoken in the face of dodgier decisions these days, and I think that is a good thing. It does seem like ideas such as morality and ethics in the games industry, it seems like they went out the window ages ago, but
nobody cares about morality or ethics, okay? The only reason that companies ever say or pretend that they care about that kind of stuff is to make people happy. They're like, oh yeah, they care about us. They only care about money, okay? And the only way it's ever going to stop is if the government tells them to stop. That is the only way anything is ever going to make even the slightest bit of a difference.
They seem to be coming back. People seem to just not be happy about a lot of this gambling-like stuff, and that certainly is a good thing. However, I don't want to leave you in too much of a happy note, though. It's time to be just a little bit dismal. Because sure, it's great seeing skeptical consumers and, everyone who's watching channels like mine. That's really good, especially in a world where, culture is almost being replaced with intellectual property and people are just fanboying over things all the time. But here's the thing. Most of these business models are predicated upon the majority of players not paying. So I have a rather dismal outlook on it. A lot of these loot box models, they're based on whaling. 90% of the players don't even have to click anywhere near the loot boxes for them to be profitable because they are inherently designed to be profitable off a tiny number of players. And that's really what makes me worry that the consumer backlash won't be enough to get the industry to self-regulate because, yeah, the industry is going to look at all of the backlashing consumers and think, yeah, well, they're not the people who are buying the loot boxes anyway, so yeah, why should we?
Who cares about the backlash? Like, fuck that, who cares? If people are buying them and you're making money, that's the only thing that really matters. Like, that's the way that they look at it, I can guarantee it.
Yeah, hopefully there are more situations like Star Wars Battlefront 2 where the players actually just turn around and pull their support for the game. Apparently that game is far better, but, well, with a game like FIFA, we're just not seeing the audience actually do that, which is quite sad.
Yeah, it's too much of a mainstream audience for that to happen.
This situation where this report exists. Overall, I'd love to hear what you think should be done. What is your opinion on regulation? I'd love to hear down below. And if you'd like to discuss this further in a place that's a bit better than the YouTube comments, be sure to hit up our new Discord. It's a very shiny place, and I recommend it highly. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
this is great. Obviously, it's good. I'm very happy they're making this change, and hopefully, this is going to be a step in the right direction. Now, will it be a step in the right direction? We'll see. Now, I've changed my perspective on this a little bit. I used to be pretty okay with loot boxes being random, like randomized loot boxes, as long as it was in a free game. But now I guess I kind of just look at it more like gambling in general. And if I think that it's just gambling in general, why the fuck would I be okay with that, regardless